morning and welcome to Atheist Talk on KTNF AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Good morning to all of you joining us locally by radio and streaming online. We appreciate you tuning in. Today is Sunday, August 5th. Why did I put 8th? 2018. I guess I'm ready for it to be the 8th. I'm your host, Hertzy Hertz, and I'm in studio with Jordan, and we have a special guest via Skype, which is Dan from Britain. Debating religion is a time-honored tradition. Oftentimes we consider these debates, or when we consider these debates, we think of Hitchens, Dawkins, or Harris. But honestly, these debates happen all the time. In fact, there was one in Wisconsin at a festival called Athanatos, I can't speak this morning fast. Dan from Britain came all the way across the pond to do 1, 2, or 4 of these debates at the festival. He's worked at Doctors Without Borders, has an undergraduate in philosophy, and keeps up his skills by debating people online and on stage. This is an open conversation, and we welcome and encourage listener interaction with your phone calls to 952-946-6205, your emails to radio@mnatheist.org, or tweet us at Atheist Talk. The phone number is only available when we're live, but you can always email or tweet whether we're live or whether you're listening to the podcast. Jordan, Dan, welcome to Atheist Talk.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So Dan, how was your trip?
Oh, it was pretty good. I ended up flying via Iceland because you can't actually fly direct from the UK straight to the Midwest. So I had to go via somewhere, and Reykjavik seemed like the most interesting option. So I had a nice little 3-day stopover there to get my jet lag in stages.
I was going to say 3-day stop. That sounds awesome. I would love to do that.
That's great. There's whales and trolls and I would say geysers, but I've been told that is not right, and I should say geysers. So.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, because I was going to say geysers has a whole different connotation, at least here.
Yeah, I've gathered that. It's one of those things where we're separated by a common language.
That's true.
So, all right. Before we get to the arts festival, the main reason you came over here, Dan, just tell us a little bit about yourself, like your background in education, like maybe where you're from, all that sort of stuff. Sure.
Well, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from the deep south. No, I was born in the Midlands in Britain, and grew up mostly in Yorkshire, in a very liberal Methodist church, to the extent that I suspect a lot of the people who I've been hanging out with the last few days would not consider it a Christian church. But it was, from my point of view, it was what it was, and I sort of gradually fell away from it during my teens. I started volunteering to help run the Sunday school, so I didn't have to listen to the sermons, actually, because I had to go, but I didn't have to be in the church. Then I did a philosophy degree, as you said, largely from not knowing what else to do with myself, and that set the seal on atheism for me, I think. And at the end of my philosophy degree, I then went on to do a nursing, because I didn't know what else to do. But I didn't want to lose the practice of debating, so I started going on, I guess, what were some of the early internet discussion forums in about 98, 99. And the most interesting ones to me were American ones. So I started interacting with some of the people who I've been meeting, in some cases for the first time these last few days. But one guy who I particularly have been sparring with for now, 20 years, was the organizer and of this festival, and he's the director of, now, he wasn't then, but he's the director and founder of Athanatos Christian Ministries.
Oh, that's how you
we
say
disagree.
it.
Yeah. So, well, I didn't want to correct you at the time, but I'm pretty sure that's it.
I have a terrible thing with pronouncing stuff.
So, well, in my case, it's down to Britishness. So, as with Geyser and Giza.
Yes.
So he and
I
have been arguing back and forth. We disagree about almost everything, but I really like the guy. He's a good friend, and we amicably have been arguing throughout, our last few decades. While I went into emergency department nursing, and then I started working for Doctors Without Borders. These days I work in public health, but it's remained an interest and a pleasure to spar with him online. And these last few days I got to do it in person, which was great.
Excellent. So you said probably right around the time you were in your university, you became an atheist during your philosophy courses?
Yeah, I think I hadn't given it a label before then. It was... It's strange how you evolve, isn't it? The first religious issue I remember having was from being a very young child. I remember being taught about God, and then probably about 4 or 5, I think we moved and we started going to the local church, and all of a sudden it was all about Jesus, and I felt pretty bad for God. I was like, who's this Jesus character who's coming along and stealing all the glory? I felt like I'd understood that there was a God, and God looked after us, and God was the one who we ought to be thinking about. And so maybe that was the start of my of my distance from religion. That right off the bat I thought, hey, this is unfair.
Yeah,
why is he getting all the...
This doesn't quite make sense to me.
Yeah, it's like the usurper, and we're talking about him.
Is this something that your family took well to, or not?
My parents are still very much a part of the church, but as I said, it is a very liberal church. My dad is actually a lay pastor.
Okay.
Within the church, but from our conversations, I would say he's pretty much a deist. He's
Okay.
not particularly extreme, and it's not a requirement in a lot of British churches, the older British churches anyway. My mum's a bit more committed. I think she'd rather I wasn't an atheist, but we have a lot of conversations about this, and it's never been a problem between us.
Okay. Now, I know you had mentioned before we did the program, we kind of got your with your background. You said that religion is not as big of an issue over in the UK versus, say, over here.
That's my perception. Yeah.
Okay.
As I said, I've talked to a lot of Americans about this, both atheists and Christians, and in a way, in Britain, I think it's almost like it's considered almost undecorous to talk about it. It's considered something that ought to be private. I think people might be uncomfortable. People I work with might be uncomfortable if I was a very outspoken atheist, but only in so much as they would be uncomfortable with anyone expressing any strong feelings about anything, really. It's just you don't tend to talk about religion to people who aren't very close friends in late night conversations with plenty of wine. It's not something that's considered appropriate to bring into public life, and it, unlike here, if a politician is conspicuously religious, it would tend to be a handicap rather than an advantage.
Yeah, and that's actually an interesting thing, because I know in Minnesota specifically, there's the idea of the two things you don't talk about is religion and politics, unless it's with, like you said, close family and friends. And so I try to stay away from certain parts of the U.S. because I'm like, oh, you're going to ask me questions, and I really don't want to answer those. I know my sister who lives out in Washington State, especially after she got pregnant, that was a big question of, oh, well, what church are you going to go to? And she was like, and it definitely also depends on how rural you go to, because even in Minnesota, if you go more rural, some of that stuff's picking up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It can be not discussed, but hugely important, or not discussed and considered fairly low down in the the list of ways you define yourself. And I think in Britain, for most people, it's it's not going to be in the top 5 things that they would consider really defining of their identity.
I wish we had that.
Yeah, let's say for us, it's like the opposite. And politicians, for us, it's like, oh, you're a very devout Christian? Well, you got my vote. That's pretty much it.
Well,
that's such a low bar, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because I have heard that, because there's actually a project that I need to get on the air, who their whole thing is to help atheists get into office. And they found that when it comes to like city council and state legislative, it's not as much of an issue. But it seems to me once you start getting that more national attention kind of stuff, that's when all of a sudden it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you mean you don't do the same thing I do?
Yeah. Yeah, I may be misremembering this, but I thought at one stage there were more openly gay, legislators or politicians in Washington D.C. than there were openly atheist.
I was going to say, I mean, I think you really just need one openly gay to outnumber the atheists. Because I don't think that we've gotten close a couple of times, but I don't think we've quite gotten there.
Right. Fingers crossed, eh?
Oh, I know.
Yeah, we can only hope, but I don't know. It almost seems like we're moving in the right direction, but it's still, I don't know. It's become a nightmare around here, actually. So.
Yeah, but we will return with our guests, Jordan and Dan, right after the break. Please stay with us. I'm Hertzie Hertz, and you're listening to Atheist Talk on KTNF AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Thank you for tuning in to Atheist Talk on AM 950 KTNF. I'm your host, Hertzie Hertz, and we're having what I would classify as a great conversation with Jordan and Dan. Before we get back, however, I do want to remind everyone listening that immediately following the program, you can listen to American Atheist Viewpoint, an official production of American Atheists. Please note, you can always catch American Atheist Viewpoint by subscribing to the podcast version in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or the podcast player of your choice. As for the here and now, if you'd like to get involved in the conversation with Jordan, Dan, and I this morning, you can call us at 952-946-6205. Email us at radio@mnatheist.org or tweet us at Atheist Talk. Or you can go on our Facebook page, Atheist Talk, which I always forget to put in the beginning. I don't know why. But anyways, Dan, Jordan, welcome back.
Still here.
Yay! The caffeine's starting to kick in.
Well, your adverts are better than caffeine. They're amazing.
All right, so let's move on to the main reason that you're on here. You went to a Christian arts festival in middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. So
I think that is the official town name. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm from a very small town, Wisconsin, so I know exactly what it's like. But
I actually look up just to see like how far it would be for him to drive. It was like 2 hours. I was like,
a little over 2 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, it's like a little over an hour from Eau Claire. It's like, yeah, there's nothing around there. So basically, what kind of festival is this? And is it? Yeah, what kind of festival is it? I guess.
So this is my friend who runs this ministry has also got a sideline in publishing. He's an author, and he set up. I think he set up a number of different publishing. Do you say imprints? I'm not sure, but he's a publisher. So he's self-publishing his own books, and he's publishing fiction and non-fiction by the Christian authors. He also has a particular line in publishing kind of out-of-print books that either are theologically interesting or from his point of view politically important. So no, he's republished some eugenics texts from the 20s because he's very concerned about those sort of issues coming back. So the idea of evangelizing through the arts, whatever those arts may be. I mean, there's been some Christian music groups here and some Christian artists in the sense of painting and stuff, and a lot of authors coming along to give talks or listen to talks about literary devices. Or I went to quite an interesting session by a filmmaker in the south of France who's making films to try and convert some of the Muslim population of North Africa. I mean, good luck to him. I think that's going to be a hard job. But the techniques involved were interesting and kind of paralleled the sort of message that I was trying to get across as the black sheep, so to speak, of the conference. That if you're going to engage with people of very different ideological backgrounds, you have to go to them. You have to understand where they're coming from and what their problems are with your beliefs, so that you can have a sensible conversation, not just run headfirst at them with your preconceptions front and center.
Awesome. So, and now you did 4 debates, right?
Yeah.
So I've done one debate via podcast, and so I'm going to default to your expertise. How much interrupting do you usually get in these debates?
From the audience or from each other?
Yes. We're going to go with yes. I didn't have an audience when I did the podcast, but since you did on stage, we'll go with yes.
Let's go with the audience. I'm curious.
Bit of both. I mean, so the way that we usually debate, there were 3 of us on stage. There's myself, the festival organizer, and another friend from online debating who is a Christian, but I would say he's politically and also religiously he's at a point in between the 2 of us. So he mainly acted as the moderator, which was nice of him. So he would keep us on track time-wise, and he would, say, oh, okay, well, that was interesting. So a question occurs to me is this, and I'd like to hear both your responses.
Oh, so you had a better moderator than mine. Robert, if you're listening, I'm calling you out. He's a friend podcaster, so.
It's a tough job to be a good moderator and not jump in too much and impose your own viewpoint. He only did that when appropriate. I think if both of them were debating me, it would have felt like bullying. So it was,
right.
It helped to have not a neutral voice exactly, but someone who was paying attention to the flow of the thing. And we left time open. So one of the things that the moderator did was we'd get sort of to the end of a topic as much as you can get to the end. I mean, we've been arguing about these things for 20 years and we haven't got to the end yet. So, to get to the end in an hour and a half is unlikely to happen. But, we'd get to what seemed like a natural close point, and the moderator would ask if there were any questions from the audience on that topic before we moved on to the next one. So that worked pretty well. There was one debate, the third one, where things were a bit more contentious or hard-hitting, I guess, because I was making an argument that I feel very passionate about the immorality in the Old Testament. And with Doctors Without Borders, I worked a couple of years ago. I worked in Iraq for a while, and I sort of saw firsthand some of the results of what ISIS had done there in the areas that it had occupied, and spoke to people who'd been exposed to that. And I kept thinking, wow, this is children of Israel behavior. They're taking sex slaves, they're killing men, women, and children, they're executing homosexuals, they're killing for religious differences, and they're imposing a rigid kind of, Sharia or Leviticus, take your pick. So I made this analogy in the debate, and that was obviously quite offensive to some people, and I'm suggesting that that God does evil things, which is a hard thing to hear if you're a very committed Christian. So I appreciate them being nice to me while I'm saying things that are very challenging for them to hear. But in that debate, there was a lot of hands raised and people coming forwards, waving that they've just got to say something to me. They've got to show me how I'm wrong. So that was the one where we had a lot of more active audience participation. In the others, it was facilitated audience participation.
So did anybody, audience or on the stage, did anybody have anything new? And I was going to say,
I don't think there's a lot.
I'm going to have like a super short because we're getting into the intro music or outro music.
I can hear it. Yeah, not incredibly new. No, I think all these debates have been had before, haven't they? And yeah, sometimes things are presented in a novel way, but there was nothing that surprised me really.
All right, well, we'll return with our guests, Jordan and Dan, right after the break. Please stay with us. I'm Hertie Hertz, and you're listening to Atheist Talk on KTNF, AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Thank you for tuning in to Atheist Talk on AM 950, KTNF. I'm your host, Hertie Hertz, and we're having what I would classify as a wonderful conversation with Jordan and Dan. But before we continue this conversation, which will be our final segment, there's a bit of housekeeping I need to attend to. Atheist Talk is produced with the funding from Minnesota Atheists and Cucumbers Restaurant in Edina. Please consider visiting our sponsors, and if you do, let them know that you appreciate their support of Atheist Talk. If you'd like to advertise on the program and help keep us on the air, please contact us at radio@mnatheist.org. I also want to note our group of dedicated volunteers and the generous donations of you, our listeners. You help keep Atheist Talk on the air and in podcast form. I'd also like to note our donors of the week, which is George, Nancy, Shirley, Jim, and the rest of the Flying Spaghetti Monster patrons. Thank you so much. If you're able to help with a donation, please consider doing so at our Radio Fund page or at our Patreon at www.patreon.com/atheisttalk. Minnesota Atheists is a 501c3 tax-deductible organization. We couldn't do the show without you, and we deeply appreciate your support. Music for Atheist Talk is by composer and member Brent Michael Davis and is used with permission. Please note all opinions are of the guest and host only and do not necessarily reflect those of the Minnesota Atheist organization. As always, check out the Minnesota Atheist website for podcasts of previous programs, browse articles, book reviews, and peruse the calendar of upcoming events. And in fact, I have a whole list of events that Heather emailed me that I totally forgot to put in my notes here today. But I do know that the Cucumbers brunch is going on this morning. Jordan, are you going to go? I know I'm putting you on the spot because I asked you earlier.
I think so.
You think so? I think
so.
I'm
not. I don't live close to there. Usually, I live more Minneapolis area, but I'm close enough today. I think I can make it.
Awesome. Well, I do know that we have a Free Thought 5K registration from Camp Quest. That should be up on our meetup. And then we also have the Secular Women Work Conference, which is on the weekend of the 24th, I believe. And I will be there because it is going to be awesome. There's going to be guests from all over, and it's going to be talking about organizing groups and such. So I totally need help with that, with this program. But with all that relevant and wonderful information out of the way, let's get back to our conversation with Jordan and Dan.
Excellent.
Dan, you still there?
I am. Yep.
Oh, good. Okay. You were quiet for a moment. I was like, no, don't say we lost you. This is the longest segment. Oh, Hunter, do we have a call? Oh, I think we have a call, so we'll be really quick. So, Dan, what was your favorite question for this year at the festival for this debate?
What was your favorite, as far as your debate goes, what part did you enjoy the most?
Oh, it's not the show.
I did enjoy the back and forth on the Old Testament morality thing because it got into questions of the culture at the time, and someone was arguing that in a sort of collectivist culture it would be it's totally reasonable when you conquer and kill all the warriors in that particular tribe. Totally reasonable thing to do to kill all the baby boys because otherwise they're just going to grow up to be just like their parents. And I mean I didn't flat out say that I thought that was a genocidal point of view, but I got pretty close to it. And although it was the tensest part of the debates, the other ones were just they were fun for us, and it seemed like they were fun for the audience as well. A lot of people said it's great to hear a civilized debate so different from the stuff you get online where people are just demonizing each other. And there's something very important about being able to look the other person in the eyes and recognize their humanity even while you're disagreeing with them. But so most of it was just fun. But although it was a bit more tense, I actually did enjoy. This is the real kind of stuff we're talking about. We're talking about human lives and whether or not our humanity is universal or or whether you want to, make excuses and say that some people are a little bit less human in order to. In this case, my perception was the guy who was arguing that was trying to justify something that I think cannot and should not be justified.
So the festival had a whole bunch of other events, and Jordan, I might be stepping on your toes, I'm sorry. But the festival had a whole bunch of other events. Did you take place, or did you look at any of those, or go to any of those?
Yeah, I went when I wasn't involved in anything else, because I'm also a sort of musician. So I did a couple of music spots as well, and that was just light musical entertainment in one of the tents. So when I wasn't either debating or performing, I went to some of the other interesting events that were going on, and I wasn't really the target audience of how to evangelize to people from an Islamic background. But it was interesting to see some of the presenters, both in terms of their presentation style, because I always like to pick up ideas about how I could improve my own public speaking, and also just to hear what they were about and what they were passionate about.
Well, that's great. Now I'm curious. After the debates, you're going around doing stuff. Did you have anybody come up to you and be like, "Hey, you're that atheist from the debate"? Like, start kind of like yelling at you or taunting you or any of that stuff?
Yes to the first part of the question, and no to the second. So it was. I felt like I felt like a minor celebrity, really.
Okay.
Everyone's like, "Oh, have you talked to the atheist yet?" And he's British. So lots of people wanted to talk to me either about what we'd said, things that they'd thought in response, that they'd wished the other, my adversaries, so to speak, had raised, and points they wanted to make to me and hear my response to. Some people wanted to just talk to me about other stuff, about Britain, about political things. I had a really good conversation about different styles of healthcare. I've worked in the National Health Service in the UK for a long time, so I'm very passionate about what we don't call there but would call here socialized medicine. So that was a fun topic. But and as I said, a lot of people wanted to come up to me and say how nice it is to hear profound differences of opinion expressed in a non-hostile and non-demeaning way. We can disagree about really important things, but we can still be friends. Yes to the first part, but nobody was remotely.
They weren't demonizing you at all. Okay.
No, everyone, and maybe it was rubbing off on them, but I've had nothing but warm Midwestern hospitality. Oh,
that's really good to hear. There's I know that it was in Wisconsin, but we do have a thing here called Minnesota nice, but I think it's close enough. So
sure, yeah. I mean, these are similar to the UK in a way. There's a lot of decorum in Midwestern culture, from what I understand, and it's important to be civil, I think, on all sides.
No, I totally agree, and I lost my place here. There was one thing I was gonna ask about. Apparently, every year they have a reenactment in the death and resurrection of Jesus, but that was canceled this year. Do you have any info as to why? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I think that has happened. I wasn't sure how I would feel about seeing that, but yes, it didn't happen this year.
Okay.
I don't have any direct knowledge as to why, but
okay.
That's a very. I mean, that's something I can't really imagine happening in British churches. I think that would be a very morally conflicted experience, and that's part of perhaps the atheist perspective and part of the British perspective. But I'm just not sure how I would feel about watching a reenactment of the the torture and death of a human being, sort of for entertainment, sort of to make a theological point. So in some ways I was glad it didn't happen.
I've seen these, and it is, as our Minnesotan listeners will hear from my voice, it was interesting.
Right.
Which is the Minnesota polite way of saying, I don't want to talk about it.
A little bit screwed up, maybe.
Yeah. And then also I went to an Assemblies of God college for 9 months. Please don't ask. It was a very odd time. But we did the play Godspell, which is basically the Book of Matthew put to song. It's really weird. Jordan's like trying not to laugh. It's really weird. We should probably watch it. And it also has that whole piece of the death and the resurrection, and the reactions that people have are fascinating to watch. And it's I almost wish I could go watch it again as an atheist, because I think it would be interesting. Because I grew up Catholic, so as a Catholic, I was looking around a little bit, and I was like, I know this is a big thing, but this is like really, you guys are really into this.
I think that's the way it would seem to me as well. I'd almost want to go on and watch the audience rather than the actual show.
Yeah.
Just to see some of the reactions, just see it's like, holy crap, this is actually happening right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, when I was in Iraq, I've forgotten the name of Ashura, the Shia festival where they're like self-flagellating, and it's not, it's not pretend. They're really doing it. They're really whipping themselves with like, knotted cords to raise, a spray of blood from their backs.
Oh,
and that's an interesting thing to see. We mainly kept away from it actually because you want to try and avoid any gathering where religious tensions run high, and also because it's a Shia festival. There's the potential for it to be targeted by Sunni extremist groups like ISIS. So we didn't linger, but that was, I don't know. It's strange. It's strange from my perspective, I should say. Obviously it's totally normal if you grow up with it and you can see the purpose in it. But from my point of view, in both cases, the passion experience and that kind of self-flagellation, I just think, why would that be a good thing? It doesn't make sense to me.
I want to say, I think it's in I know it's in more than here, but I know in the Philippines and then in other countries too, there are people who actually will crucify themselves too as a thing. That's...
Yeah, I saw something like that. They do that like on Easter every year, just to. Yeah, I don't know. They just kind of do that. It's just like, this is what Jesus did or went through.
I mean,
so
I presume they have some help. Otherwise, hammering in that last nail would be really hard.
Well, it is very tiny nails.
Still, I can't imagine putting just a nail through my hand. Just a tiny nail through my hand. It's like, no.
Yeah.
No, well, we've had this conversation turned into an interesting one. But thank you for tuning into Atheist Talk. We'd love for you to join us again next Sunday, which should be another exciting episode. And I do want to call out, thank you, Maddie, for helping us get Dan on the air. That was super awesome. Yep, I still called you out. Haha. But thank you, and join us next week at AM 950 KTNF.